Well, hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you once again to another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner with your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, and we are glad to be back with you this evening, and thank you for joining us. As you know, our show highlights veterans from across the country and veteran programs and veteran service providers. So we are always looking for great guests and great organizations. So if you know anyone out there, or if you're a veteran and you'd like to come on our show and share your experiences with us, or you're a veteran service provider, or you work in a veteran initiative, feel free to email me at theliteraryvet@gmail.com. And, we'll talk about getting you on the show because we're always looking for good veterans to talk to and veteran programs. So I want to welcome you to do that. I also want to take just a minute to thank the guests who send in comments and emails to us. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you watching the show. So before we get started, though, again, as you guys know, I've got two great sponsors for the show, and I always highlight them at the beginning. Quest Jewelers from Merrifield, Virginia. And I always tell you, you got to contact Pete or Wantane at Quest Jewelers. I can't say it enough, folks. Contact them, call them, take a look at the website, see what they got. And if you call Pete, you get him on the phone, tell him you watch the show, and he'll give you a discount for anything that you buy. So we really appreciate what they're doing for us. We also have nationwide IT services. NIS is a service disabled veteran-owned small business located in Fairfax, Virginia, and retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park and his crew are ready to meet your business needs, whatever they may be, whether it's training, IT support, IT security, program management, program studies, anything like that. He and his folks at his company are ready to help you. So I encourage you to look them up. There's their email address. Their HTTPS web address. There's the email address and their phone number. So get in touch with them and see if they can help you. So I want to bring on tonight's guest, and this is kind of fun for me because our guest tonight, Louis Klein. Louis, when I look at his bio, it's so interesting because he and I are so parallel, it's uncanny. So, Louis, I'm just going to clue the audience in on a couple of things before we start talking with you. But, I do want to thank you and welcome you to tonight's show. But the interesting thing is, Louis and I both spent around 21 years in the Army, both retired as first sergeants in the Army. And Louis spent most of his career in the same MOS or specialty that I started my career in an artillery fire direction center. So, talk about uncanny parallels. But Louis, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here.
Now, I also know that you were something else you did that I did as well is you took advantage of the time later on to go back to school, and finish your degree, because I'm sure your military career didn't give you much opportunity to do that, did it?
Not so much, although oddly enough, as a fire direction officer or NCO, I was involved in the early days of computers coming into FDC, where we went from charts and darts to having computers. And in one assignment at Fort Sill, I was an instructor at the artillery school and actually got to work with the contractor who was building the next generation of software. Oh. That gave me an introduction to IT and led me eventually to my degree and my civilian career.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some of that, but I want to talk a little bit more about your time in the military. And first of all, I still remember when I went to the MEP station. My recruiter, I came back from the MEP station, and he was scratching his head because when I went to the MEPS, I had 126 GT score. And I came back, and he had already gotten the report, and he said, wait a minute. He said, you took FDC and field artillery? He said you could have had almost any job you wanted. Why? How did you end up in that? And so I just told him it sounded interesting. And when I first enlisted in 1981, there was a $4,000 enlistment bonus that came with the MOS. So that kind of led me into it. But how did you get in the Army, and what prompted you to go in that direction?
Well, I enlisted first in the Louisiana National Guard in 1976.
Oh, okay.
Just out of high school. They were offering college tuition if you were in the Guard. So I enlisted in the Guard as a medic, went off to basic and Fort Sam, came back, served in the Guard. And then the economy was not in great shape in the late 70s down in New Orleans, which is where I'm from. And so I said, I kind of enjoyed working with the Guard. Let me go into active duty as a medic. And so I enlisted, went off to Germany to a little base outside of Nuremberg called Herzog Base. And was assigned
Yeah,
exactly.
And near Nuremberg, you said.
Check.
My first duty station in Germany was in Nuremberg at Merrill Barracks as part of 2nd ACR.
Okay. Just down the road from us.
Just down the road. Go ahead, keep going. We may find some more.
So anyhow, I was assigned as a medic, and I wound up as a medic with a Lance missile unit there at Herzog.
Okay.
And I got to be friends with some of the FDC guys in the field. FDC always, they're in a track, so they had heat, they had light, and they had coffee. And I said, this looks pretty good. But one of my real ambitions in the Army as a young soldier, my grandfather was in the 101st Airborne, and I looked up to him so much because he jumped into Normandy.
Yeah.
And so I said, I want to go to jump school. And as a medic, that was open to me. So I went to jump school. I went to the 82nd. But again, immediately post-Vietnam, promotions as a medic were really, really slow. Guys were getting out in droves. And so I enjoyed the military. So I decided to re-up, and I went and looked. As you saw, this was 1981. There was a big bonus for field artillery fire direction.
Yeah.
And so I jumped on it, went to school at Fort Sill, and right back to Germany.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I didn't realize that you were in the reserves first and down near New Orleans, because I enlisted from Gulfport, Mississippi, and actually went to the MEP station in New Orleans, to do my processing. This is just crazy uncanny here. So I know what you mean about the FDC, because my first tour was in 2ID in Korea. I was part of 2nd of the 31st Field, or 2nd of the 17th Field Artillery, right up just shy of Munsan, and outside a little village called Panmunjom. No, I'm sorry, Tokari. No, was it Tokari? I think it was Tokari.
I think it is Tokari.
Yeah, Tokari. And in my first experience there, our FDC was in the back of a built-up deuce and a half.
Mine was in a 5.77. You had the better deal, I think.
Yeah.
Those tracks were a bear to keep running.
Yeah, so it's just so uncanny, though, that the parallels between our two careers. So how did you, I got to tell you, let me share something with you real quick. And then I want to ask you, how you maintained your career in field artillery. When I told you that was my first MOS when I enlisted for 4 years. And I remember we were on a night move, because when I left Korea, I went to the 101st at Fort Campbell. And there it was 2nd to 31st. We were a 155 towed battalion, a M19 or 8.
Okay.
And we were making a night move, and I was standing out on advanced party at the new location, the ground guide the FDC in. And I was standing there with my first sergeant. It was dark. It was cold. It was raining. And my first sergeant looked over at me and he says, "Holbert, are you going to stay in the military?" And I said, "Well, First Sergeant, I don't know. I haven't decided yet." He said, "Let me give you a piece of advice." He said, "If you are get out of this shit because it'll kill you. That coming from a field artillery first sergeant. And so, I did. I spent my 4 years and then re-enlisted and spent the rest of my career in the chemical corps. But, I know that life in a field artillery unit can be very difficult. Very physically taxing. So how did you manage that as you went on for your career? Because I know you did 3 tours in Germany and a tour in Korea and then the 82nd. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, it pains me to confess this. Lance was maybe outside of radar, just about the softest artillery you could get. We were a nuclear capable surface to surface missile unit. We couldn't live fire anywhere in Germany. So the only way we could do a live fire when you were stationed overseas was to fly to Crete. And we would go to the island of Crete to a NATO missile firing range for a month every summer.
Oh my God.
That was tough duty.
I'm sure it was.
We didn't go to Graf. Well, we went to Graf to fire crew-served weapons, but we couldn't shoot Lance because it was liquid fueled. And I commuted back and forth 3 years in Germany, back to Fort Sill, because at the time, the only stateside duty station for a Lance guy was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We had 6 battalions in Europe, 2 at Sill, plus the schoolhouse. So I basically commuted to Germany for 3 tours. Then I got picked up on a special assignment. I was selected to come work here in D.C. at PERSCOM as an assignment manager for 3 years.
Okay.
I had a great career. No false modesty, but at one time there were about 4 E7s in the Army who, if somebody had a question, they would call one of the 4 of us. And we all knew each other. I was one of those guys, and I did real well. But coming up to DC was a whole different animal because it was moving from artillery or teaching artillery to learning about Army personnel management, assignment policies, learning how to identify soldiers for assignments, which was yet another step into the computer world.
Yeah.
And because I was stationed here, I wouldn't go to the field. So I was at school at night, going to University of Maryland, University College as a computer science major.
Yeah. So that's when you finished your degree, wasn't it?
Actually, I finished the month I retired. From DC, I went to Korea as a first sergeant, came back to SIL, spent 2 years, and then I was asked to step into a sergeant major position back at the schoolhouse, which again was a nice career move, but it also set me up to go back to school full time at night. I was taking lots of classes. The month I retired, July 98, I also graduated with my bachelor's degree.
Yeah, that's interesting so let me ask you this first. So you were an instructor for a while?
Yep.
So here we are. I was a certified instructor at Fort Benning at the Chem Bio school there, the regional Chem Bio school for 3 years. And I went back to school in that assignment because I didn't have no TDA, no field duty, none of that stuff. And I went and finished my undergraduate degree and went back right after and crammed my master's degree in a year. And I mean, it's just so funny to sit here and talk to you and just see the parallels between the two of us. I mean, it's with the exception of a few things. I mean, it's almost just parallel between the type of stuff we did and, the way we went about our career. So you said, you were teaching, what were you teaching in terms of artillery? Was it regular type of artillery, or was it?
I was teaching the Lance missile system.
Okay, all right.
Fire direction and operations. Do we have time for a funny story?
Sure, yeah.
So I'm an instructor at the schoolhouse. I'm teaching an officer's class, second lieutenants, just coming out of OBC or in OBC, and then captains who were slated to a Lance missile unit. I'm standing there, I'm teaching, down in the basement of Knox Hall in one of the computer labs. And in the back of the classroom, there's a couple of captains because, they'd had some of this stuff and they really didn't think they needed to be there.
Yeah.
And so I'm up on platform teaching fire mission planning or something, and the lieutenants are digital, they're digging in. These two captains are in the back of the room with newspapers open chatting. So I walked back there. I said, guys, would you mind? I know you've been exposed to this, not a big deal, but these kids need to listen.
Yeah.
They said, we're sorry, Sergeant Klein. We'll clean it up. So we went on. A couple hours later, same thing happens again. I come to a tight position of attention, and in my best first sergeant voice, I called the room to attention. And I said, now, gentlemen, if you can't abide by my classroom rules, I will happily escort you down to talk to Colonel Dooley, who was hell on wheels.
Yeah.
So I had no more problems with him. Fast forward 3 months, I PCS to Germany. I report to my battery.
Uh-oh.
The battery commander was one of those captains. He said, Sergeant Klein, I've been waiting for you. That was 1986.
Oh, my gosh.
Mike Florio and I are still friends. But I'll never forget the shock of seeing his face. Like, oh, crap.
Oh, man, that's pretty good. So you should be at least vaguely familiar with the BCS system when it started.
That's what I was teaching when I had the captains on edge.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the 101st at that time when they first started fielding it.
Yep.
And we went from manual charts and darts. We never used a FADAC at Campbell. I used one in Korea, but we had one in Korea at 4P1, that live fire base up on the DMZ.
Yeah.
But when I got to Campbell, we were using charts and darts. And then they came up with the BCS system.
Yep.
Which,
and the TI-59.
Which was really pretty cool. But that's pretty much where I left it in artillery. I learned the BCS system, became a chief computer for our section. And then, when I finished my term after the first 4 years, I had made sergeant. So that's when I re-enlisted and went to Fort McClellan and changed over into the chemical corps. So that was the last time I saw field artillery duty, was right around 1984 going on 85.
In Germany, we would always end a field exercise with a full 8 hours in full mop gear. And then we would have a decontamination. It was like, okay, at least I'm going to get a shower before I go home.
Yeah.
You NBC guys.
Well, I'll share a quick funny story with you real quick. Before I actually branch transferred, I was the battery NBC specialist before I became made sergeant and became a chief computer. So I was in the FDC, but I was our battery NBC NCO.
Yep.
And there was a major right across in Duvarty headquarters there at Campbell that I got to be good friends with. And she was really, really, really nice major. And she asked me one year what I wanted for my birthday. And it just so happens that our battalion was going to be out in the field for my birthday. And I told her, I said, you know what, ma'am? I said, I'd like you to gas our battalion. And she said, is that what you want? I said, yeah.
Oh, we hated you guys.
Do you know they came around in helicopter to several of the battery locations and sprayed CS on my birthday?
Oh, you ain't
and
right.
Of course, what do you think the rest of the battery did when they found out that it was my birthday and that was her gift to me?
Mm-hmm.
You know what soldiers are like.
You were not liked.
No, needless to say, I was not very popular. Well, I tell you what, Lewis, we're going to take a short break real quick, and then when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation. So for those of you watching out there, we'll be right back in just a couple of minutes.
All right.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And of course, you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner with your host, myself, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, and from the Going Solo Media. And of course, our guest tonight is retired Army First Sergeant Lewis Klein. And Lewis, I have to ask you before we talk, because I want to get into some of your interests you're into now, but I have to ask you. I think for myself, being a first sergeant was probably one of the most rewarding positions that I had in my career. How was it for you? Did you feel that way about it, or what was it like for you?
Absolutely. The opportunity. Well, I was first sergeant in Korea. Never been there before, and one of the proudest moments in my career was the first time I stood in front of my battery, called my battery to attention. There was 141 sets of eyeballs looking at me.
Yeah.
And I realized at that moment that every one of those enlisted soldiers was putting their faith in me
Yeah.
to do the right thing at the right time, to get them to where they needed to be to do their job and come home. And so, yeah, it was a big deal. And I'm still in touch with some of my old troops. I hear from them at Christmas and whatnot. And it was an amazing time.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask you that is because I kind of thought that's what you would say, because, I viewed becoming a first sergeant the same way. And, I still remember the day that I pinned my diamonds on, because I was promotable, and I went to they sent me to El Paso to the battle staff course first, and then I got back to Germany. 2 months later, they were sending me back to the first sergeant's course. But I remember when I first got my rank pinned on, and we got the soldiers. They were in the middle of the workday or mid morning of the workday. And I decided to take a walk past the company area down to the little PX there in Kitzigan on our little caserne. And I remember going in there, and I grabbed me something to drink, and I was getting ready to come out and walk back down to the company. And I was just standing right out by the front of the PX before I took off. And these two soldiers walked by, and they stopped, they went by and they took a look at me, kind of side-eyed. Hey man, there's a first sergeant standing over there. You know how that could be. And one of the soldiers, as he walked by, he looked at me, he says, "Good morning, first sergeant. How are you?" And as a sergeant first class, soldiers just didn't do that very often. It was just such a difference. And I'm like you, standing in front of that company. I had 135 soldiers in my company. And I felt the same way that you just described about, having responsibility for, providing leadership and safety and example of doing the right thing for that company. And I was the same way. I thought it was probably the most rewarding assignment I had before I retired. Absolutely. So I'm not surprised that you would say that.
Yeah, and it's funny, my experience as a first sergeant informs what I do today in my job.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm an IT program manager. I have software development teams, people who know stuff that I couldn't possibly do.
Yeah,
but it's my job to organize them, get them resourced, and keep them moving in the right direction. And that's a lot of what we did in the Army as first sergeants.
Yeah, true. Very true. I just happened to end up with an HHC. So, I had all the S1 through 4s, and guess what else? Guess what else I had that?
You had the command team.
And I had the DFAC.
Oh,
yes.
The mess hall.
Oh, the mess hall, yes. So I had all that fun stuff. But, you're right. I mean, you learn so many skills coming up through the military that by the time you become a first sergeant, it's not only a rewarding position, but it's one that you're right. I think really prepares you well, and it sounds like it did the same thing for you as it did for me.
Oh, absolutely.
But I am so thankful, and it sounds like you're the same way of having that opportunity, to be a first sergeant and wear the diamond and work with the soldiers and just enjoy, that assignment.
There are things that I don't miss, like mud and snow and
Yeah.
and mop floor when somebody decides we need to be gassed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love the troops.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way today. My team is family.
So let me ask you this. You spent, 21 years.
Yep.
What told you it was time to go?
Oh, that one's pretty easy. It was twofold. I used to be a pretty serious racquetball player and a bicyclist, but playing racquetball was responsible for 2 knee surgeries, and then finally I tore my Achilles. I was at Fort Sill, stationed at Sill, acting sergeant major at the schoolhouse, 1987. I'm playing just warming up on the racquetball court, and the guy I was with stepped on my heel, cut my Achilles just clean. And I knew at that moment that my days of being able to lead PT and stay up with the guys running were done.
Oh my gosh.
I said, it's time to set it up. I rehabbed. I was able to get back to doing to some, but I couldn't. I used to kind of pride myself that if they're going to beat me on the PT test, they're going to work for it.
Yeah. And
I just couldn't do that anymore.
Well, you know what? And CC, I know CC's backstage listening to this, and I'm just flabbergasted again, because again, that's what prompted me to retire. I was playing Frisbee football with my soldiers one morning in Germany, and I turned one way and my knee decided to go the other. And I tore my meniscus. I had to have arthroscopic surgery. That kind of put a huge damper on my running career.
Right.
Because I partially tore an ACL, but the meniscus had to be cut. And so, see, I told you this is uncanny. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, so I can totally identify. I just said, you know what? Yeah, I can't run with the soldiers like I should be able to. And, so same decision I made. It was time to retire. And so I know that, you're now working in IT program management. But those skills that you learned in the Army were really helpful to you. So what's your team like now? How many folks are you working with? And
my 2 software development teams supporting the FAA, Justice Department, and Department of Transportation. I've got a total of about 15 people on a daily basis that I'm leading, and then all kinds of other folks, both in the FAA, in the client organization, as well as our own executives for finances and, stuff. It's nowhere near as much fun as going to the field and, pulling a lanyard and blowing something up, but it pays better.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you now, we used to make fun of, and of course, in the field artillery, I know you're aware of the term, we used to make fun of the gun bunnies. And, but it was always fun to be able to go down to the guns when we were live firing, and sometimes the FDC we'd rotate down that way so we could go down and pull a lanyard or two.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always a fun feeling of power, pulling that lanyard and making that artillery piece go boom.
Absolutely. Yeah, 4th of July fireworks. It's like that. What is this pop gun stuff?
Yeah, you're right. Well, so you spent all that time in the military, and you've changed careers, and you're now in a successful IT program management position. But I know that I saw that. I thought it was funny that you talked about being a rookie guitar player. How do you classify a rookie guitar player?
What's the phrase I've heard? 3 chords and the truth. I can play some basic chords and keep rhythm on some easy tunes, but I'm a long, long way from proficient. But I'm not doing it for anybody but myself, so
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to, with me retiring again at the end of this year, I'm sitting here trying to decide what other hobby I want to take up. Cause of course I want to continue on with my show here and, talk with veterans and organizations. But, my wife's been encouraging me she said, we have a friend of ours who's an excellent guitar player. And, he's told me, he said, yeah, I'll teach you, so she said, you ought to learn to play the guitar. And so I'm kicking that idea around. I'm just not sure yet. It's
like anything new, the first getting started is hard.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding. I enjoy it. It keeps my brain busy.
So I know that you're also, a pretty avid outdoorsman. You like to do a lot of hiking and stuff like that.
Yeah. And the single biggest thing, and this really still serving, I'm not a first sergeant. At least I'm not wearing the rank on my collar anymore. I'll be a first sergeant until I die.
Yeah.
But the other big thing that I do is I've been a bicyclist of some stripe all my life. From a kid riding all over town, and I strap a baseball bat and a glove on the handlebars and go to the park, but to actually racing a little bit. When I was stationed in Germany in the late 80s, my last tour, it's funny, we had some guys from Kitzigen that I used to ride with when I was in Krailsheim from 86 to 89. And we did a bicycle ride across France to celebrate the liberation of France. 900 miles in 9 days. It was an amazing event.
So where did you end up at?
We started at Omaha Beach.
Oh, wow.
Through Paris to Strasbourg. It was an amazing trip, and I could go on for a while about that. But more significantly, nowadays I still ride. I'm not, I'm older, I'm slower, a little more relaxed.
Yeah.
But a few years ago now, I guess probably 4 years ago now, I was recovering from knee surgery. I'd had a knee replacement. And I was over on the Eastern Shore going to a bike ride in Maryland. And I met some guys in the hotel who were wearing their bicycle jersey was Strength and Honor. And it had all the military emblems on it. And so I asked one of them, I said, what's this all about? And they said, well, this is an organization that supports adaptive athletes and primarily wounded warriors. And we have guys who, you wouldn't, they don't look handicapped until you spend some time with them, but they've got balance problems. They have PTSD issues.
Yeah.
Others are very, very obvious, but they do an annual fundraiser for this organization every year, usually about the last weekend in April. It's 2 days. We ride from Washington, D.C. to Gettysburg. And the lead kind of signature athlete is a retired Army colonel who lost both legs above the knee to an IED.
Jeez.
And he's pedaling a hand bike 120 miles in 2 days.
Gee, man.
And the opportunity to support guys like Colonel Gadsden. I have a couple of friends who are retired first sergeants who are both wounded warriors, disabled vets, but there's no quit in them. And like you saw what the nation was like immediately after Vietnam.
Yeah.
After Nam, the military was not universally respected. Vietnam vets were being, they were begging on the streets, sleeping in the gutters. And the country really ignored our veterans. And one of the things I love about what we do, with the Wounded Warrior Ride, it's called Face of America.
Face of America?
Face of America.
Is that their webpage maybe, or?
It is.
So it's www.faceofamerica. Is it .org?
I believe it's .org. I'll send you the link if you want to post that separately.
Yeah, definitely. If you would, please do that. I
will. So this past year we rode end of April from, again, DC to Gettysburg. We roll out at 7:00 on Saturday morning. overnight at hotels in Frederick, and the next day we ride through the battlefield into Gettysburg, where we have a get together, some barbecue, and then everybody heads home. But we raised, what was it this year? $750,000.
Oh, wow.
That goes to helping men and women, first responders, wounded warriors, other adaptive athletes, with the opportunity to continue with a quality of life that they would not have.
Mm.
And so for me, for you as a first sergeant, that just hits home.
Oh, yeah.
It's just such a huge opportunity. Plus, it's a really easy bike ride at the pace we ride. But I love doing it. As I said, I've gotten to be friends with some other first sergeants. There's another lady, a retired colonel. She lost her leg in an accident below the knee. And 7 months after the accident, it was obvious she was never going to heal. So she made the decision to have her lower leg amputated, get a prosthetic. The Army let her go back as a halo jumper at Fort Bragg, serving with Special Forces.
Wow.
And there's no quit in these people. They will not lie down and die. And I just love it. I absolutely love that. And so it's an honor to continue to serve.
The other thing that you talk about there that seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of veterans I have here on the show, and that you're talking about, is that desire to continue to do something, to give something back, to help other veterans. That is such a recurring theme that I hear here on the show from a lot of my other guests. And, it's just amazing to see how that camaraderie that you develop while you're in the military continues on, after you leave.
Yep, absolutely true. And again, I went on this ride the first year. I had met 2 people, didn't know another soul until I ran into Colonel Gadsden. It turned out I had actually, as a contractor, worked for his organization and met him. But in general, it was, you learn how to meet people. You learn how to deal with people in the military. Because as a kid, I was pretty shy. You can't survive long in the military and not be able to get along with people from every other walk of life. So I've got a guy named Mike Brooks. I got another Paul Kilgore, both old first sergeants, 82nd Airborne, Army Airborne Ranger types. And we're all the time now. Looking forward to getting back together with them next year, because that bond is still there. And because of that, we are looking to help other veterans. And as I said, it's also first responders. And we've got civilian members who have been injured. But if they want to be involved, we'll help them be involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so great to listen to some of these stories and some of the things that you guys continue to do. Well, I want to, I've loved talking with you because, like I said, we have so many things in common. But before we wrap up the show, I want to just ask you one more thing, and it's something I do ask all my guests usually. If you could share one thought with the audience, one particular thing that you think is important or stands out to you, what would it be?
I've thought about that a little bit because you gave me a heads up on this one. Find something you're passionate about and go for it.
Yeah.
Success is, I won't say it's irrelevant, but a friend of mine once told me, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. and that sounds funny. And I know my dad would have said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And he's right. But if you're passionate about something, you're going to pursue it and you're going to make it to the best that you can. But don't, I know too many guys who drift and they just, they retire from the Army and they got a little bit of retirement and they'll go do something easy. Yeah. I don't see any passion in their life.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge. I'm 66 years old. If I were to wake up tomorrow morning and decide I wanted to go do a 60-mile bike ride, it wouldn't faze me a bit. I could do that. Yeah. I'm training for something else. It's a whole lot harder. going out to the Grand Canyon in September, and that's for a hike, and that's going to be tough. And so I'm training for it. But I'm not the fastest guy in the world, certainly not the fittest guy in the world, but I sure try to have a lot of fun in what I do. I'm good at my job. Apparently my company thinks I'm good at my job.
Yeah.
My troops, and I call them my troops.
Yeah.
Half the time, they are motivated to do the job. They do a really good job, and we take care of each other. I mean, we've had people go through deaths at work, with their family members. We've had divorces. We've had children born. And so we celebrate together, we cry together, and we work together. And it's a beautiful thing.
Well, I think you're right, too, in that, when you say find something you're passionate about, because you see a lot of our fellow veterans, you're right, they retire, and then they don't do much else the rest of the time. And not saying that it's not saying it's a bad to talk down to what they're doing, but you have so much more to do in life once you leave. There's life after the military, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And well, I tell you what, Louis, I got to tell you, it's been great having you on the show. I really enjoy talking with you, especially the parallels that we share in our careers is just uncanny. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come on tonight. And, I hope to talk to you again pretty soon as well to find out how you're doing.
Well, I'll make a run up to Manassas, and you and I can go split some barbecue at the Bone.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. But I appreciate you taking the time to come on, really.
Thank you very much. This has been fun.
Truly. Thank you very much. And for those of our audience out there, as you know, we normally will put up some information for those of you listening and watching out there. And I think, there's so much information that's come out, but there's something here important I think you need to take a look at. And the reason why I selected a YouTube video, to be honest with you, is because if you go to the VA website, they'll give you a link to this YouTube to watch. But the VA is changing payments for mailed checks. So you need to go take a look at that. And under some conditions, the VA is not going to be sending mailed checks any longer. So for those of you, and not for everyone, but you need to go take a look at it. For those of you that may be getting checks from the VA, take a look at it, find out what they're doing, find out what their new policy is going to be, and see if it's going to affect you, because it won't affect everyone. But you should definitely take a look at it. And Louis, I want to thank you. We're going to take your website that you're sending, and we're going to put it up on the page with this show on our website, on our webpage on the studio network. So we're going to make sure we put that up there for Face of America. And we will, oh, there you go. Thank you, CC. She got that up quick. So there it is on the screen, folks. For those of you that are interested and want to take a look at what Louis was talking about with the organization and how you may either be able to get involved or help for that matter. So please take the time to take a look at it. And I want to thank everyone for watching tonight's show. Veterans, as always, we want to thank you for your service, you and your families. And we hope that you are able to live your best life now, because as Louis and I talked about, there's life after the military. So thank you for watching tonight, and we hope to see you on the next show.
Roger out. Thank you.